part of the design team that was looking at the compensation scale. And I am doing that work with 2 of our policy research folks at Let's Grow Kids, as well as Janet McLaughlin from Vermont AEYC. And it's all in collaboration with the 15-member task force, which is made up, as you know, of early childhood educators across all settings. So, how did we get to, everybody wanted to know, like, what will be the numbers, what might we make, all of that kind of thing. But how did we get there is really important, and it's also really complicated because it's this whole circular kind of reason and process as to why we need to know what we want early childhood educators to make. So it's sort of like I told Rachel I want the slides this way, and then I emailed her and said, no, I want them this way. So it's always hard to know where to start, but this is where we're gonna start. What did the design team do? First, the design team looked at the consensus document that Kim just summarized and saw what are the principles that we need to consider in looking at a compensation scale. So then we researched other state and municipalities that have implemented early childhood education wage scales. We also got a lot of technical assistance from national and state partners, and we also worked with the task force, and we also worked with a focus group of family childcare homes. And we've also, I think this is the 6th sort of presentation we've done to get feedback from individuals in the field, as well as some stakeholders that'll be important to making sure the investment comes. So when we say like minimum compensation standards, it's so hard to come up with the right name because we're not talking about like a general minimum wage for Vermont. We're talking about a minimum compensation that an early childhood educator would make depending on their role and level of preparation. It doesn't mean if you are a program owner and you want to pay more than that, you couldn't do that. But it means that if you're going to participate in early childhood education in Vermont, you have an agreement that you would pay at least the minimum. We all agree early childhood educators deserve fair compensation. We know right now the investment's not there to do it. So we need to know what is that number so we know how much money we need to make sure everyone is compensated fairly and justly. So we've also seen other states and municipalities use minimum compensation standards to elevate wages quickly and equitably. DC is one of the examples that have done that. We've also seen some smaller scale programs in Virginia, and New Mexico is just launching a program right now. And we also know that other fields, like public education, use the equivalent of minimum standards to ensure that there's fair compensation. So the foundational elements of this wage scale proposal is there's 2 components. There's wages and salaries, and then there's benefits. The first time we went to the task force, like 8 months ago, and we showed them the wages, and they said, yes, and we want benefits. So then we met with them and they kind of identified what were the benefits that were most important to them. And we went back to work to figure that out. No state has figured out how to do benefits like comprehensively yet. There's some little pockets of work being done around healthcare, but no state has been quite able to implement benefits along with the wage scale. We also wanted to make sure that the wage scale was aligned with the 3 designations. So EC1, 2, and 3. And again, it's the lowest amount anyone working in an early childhood education program would be compensated. And it's across all early childhood education settings. So family childcare homes, center-based, licensed homes, any setting, nonprofit, for-profit. And we also, consider different pay structures because different programs have different pay structures. There's hourly salaried, and is there anyone here from a family childcare home? Because we met, and so there isn't, and that's disappointing. But we also met with them, and we talked about that we're not in any policy going to set a minimum salary they need to take themselves. They're sole proprietors. They still would have the ability to decide any income or revenue they make, how they use that, whether they make it as a salary or they reinvest it in their program. But what having a minimum compensation standard does is it helps us know what should be the investment needed so that their revenue actually increases as well. So one of the concerns from family child care homes was like, are you gonna tell me what I have to make? And we said, no, but we need to have a minimum compensation standard to know how much investment is needed so that we can lift the entire field. The benefits that we worked on are based on full-time equivalents with the idea that they would be prorated for part-time employees. That's general practice. So this is just a little bit about how we researched. Like, we started with the unifying framework. The unifying framework said, look to public schools. So we started there, and we did look to public schools. But what we found is that, and we built a model off that, but one of the challenges is in Vermont, what public school teachers make, and we use kindergarten wages, depends where you live. And there's a wide variety. So we based it on the median, and we built out an entire compensation scale based on that. We also looked at a model that assumed what the minimum wage would be in Vermont in 2024. And then instead of just looking at kindergarten salaries, it looked at other recognized professions that had similar levels of preparation and roles to the designations that we're looking at. So we looked at nursing, we looked at the legal profession, we looked at architects, and we specifically looked at Vermont and what the different roles in those recognized professions made in comparison to the level of preparation and the role that an early childhood educator would have based on our definitions of EC 1, 2, and 3. We brought both models to the task force, and believe it or not, using this model where we looked at a variety of professions, including public school teachers, was more advantageous to the field. And so the task force decided they wanted us to continue the work using this minimum compensation standard that builds off of minimum wage and uses other recognized professions and their level of preparation to determine what might be fair and just compensation for early childhood educators. And then they said, that was the time they said, and we want benefits. So, and this is what we think are the important benefits to include, and we did that. We went back to the task force in May and showed them everything. We made a few tweaks. We met with a few more national consultants, and we came up with the compensation scale that I'm going to show you now. And again, it's the floor. Oh, I'm not going to show it to you now. I'm going to tell you why, again, it's important. So I never know where to start in this like little circle, because you can start everywhere. This goes back to what I was saying about why it's important. So at Let's Grow Kids, we're advocating for increased investment in early childhood education. And in order to, we want a model where it is based on the cost of care, not based on the backs of early childhood educators or on the backs of parents. Parents are paying more than 30% in so many cases. I met a healthcare professional when I was at the hospital. She's paying 50% of her and her husband's salary, and she said, "This is the worst part. I'm putting it on my credit card." That's where we're at. So we need to know, when we're saying we want a child care financial assistance program where no family pays more than 10% and early childhood educators are paid a fair and just wage, we need to know, we need to say, this is what that wage is so we know how much it costs. So that's sort of this, we have to get all these pieces working together. This might be where I am, Dale. So this is the, and let me just say, this is a draft. This is a dynamic document. We meet regularly to update it and take a look what's going on and all of those things. But based on comparable preparations and roles and other recognized professions, from teaching to nursing to architecture, this was the minimum compensation standards we came up with. So the first is, you can see this would be someone that's not in, the minimum, we project the minimum wage will be around $15 an hour in 2024. So that might be a trainee. Again, this is the minimum that you would pay. That could be a trainee, that could be, a substitute. It could be someone who's chosen not to be part of the profession that works in some capacity in your program. And then we have the EC1. This would be the base annual salary. EC2, and then EC3. These would be the recommended base salaries, and they're the figures that we will work with as we are determining what the level of investment needs to be to make sure that no parent pays more than 10% and that early childhood educators have a fair and just compensation. So I didn't you can go to the next slide. I didn't print out all the benefits because it was like you wouldn't be able, it's a big slide. But we have incorporated the cost of the benefits so that we can determine if we were to implement a compensation package that was benefits and salary, the total cost is in this column.
Is the benefits similar to like what the statewide public school?
The benefits that we included were healthcare, retirement, paid time off, things like short-term disability, like kind of like a basic employee.
Not just healthcare.
Not just healthcare. No, it's that sort of like what a good job would offer you in another field.
Right.
But it was really important for us to determine the cost of that so that we have a better number when we're looking at what would be needed for investment.
Is it based on like the school model of summer vacation, or is
No,
this
this is based on an annual salary. That's a great question.